Hello, everybody. This is Peter Sterlacci with Believe, Become, Be Your Brand, and I welcome you to our monthly interview series where I basically highlight people who I like to call personal brand mechanics, whether they believe it or not. Those of you who know me, you know that I'm a passionate cyclist, and over time I've learned a lot about how to build and repair my bicycles from bicycle mechanics. And I've also met some really interesting people in my work who I feel have tools and techniques to really help people to build and maintain and tune up their personal brands. So today I'm happy to have Dr. Thomas Buckholtz with me, and Tom and I know each other from our work in Silicon Valley, so welcome, Tom.
Thank you very, very much. It's good
And
to be here, Peter.
thank you. Today I really want to talk about Tom's book here, Create Crucial Insight. And Tom wrote this book recently. It's a really interesting book, and so I have some questions for him today about the book itself, and hopefully people will be able to learn some tips and techniques from this too. So Tom, can you tell us really what was your motivation for writing Create Crucial Insight?
Well, I really believe that people can do a lot better at framing issues, at solving problems, and creating opportunities for themselves. And they can do it with more significant as well as the traditional types of situations they're involved in.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been very lucky in business, in government, in pioneering new information technologies, new business practices in the world information technology marketplace, even some advances in society and governance, to not only have participated in great efforts, but to have had time to think about how to innovate and how to innovate better. So I've been able to package up some of those thoughts about how to innovate, how to think better, into tools that I hope people will use to really do better with issues, problems, and opportunities throughout whatever they're doing. That's why I wrote the book.
Great, excellent. And I really like you start the preface of your book saying, to thrive or not to thrive, insight makes a difference. And so what exactly is insight, and can you give us an example of how it makes a difference?
Yeah, to me, insight is just a cogent collection of thoughts, and you can think about criteria that you yourself might want to attach to insight. Perhaps there are things like it's useful for future thinking, for putting together plans, for taking actions. Perhaps it's useful for communicating something to other people. Perhaps it's useful in the process of interpreting history. And hopefully it's based on some bases in history or good theory or thinking that give it credibility.
Right.
And so that's kind of an idea about insight, and it really can make a difference. I'm very glad you asked that question. Let me give you an example from quite early in my life. I grew up in the city of Palos Verdes Estates in Southern California, here in the U.S., and people were proposing uses for the 7 kilometers of city coastline, Pacific coastline. They were proposing uses for 280 hectares of other city park.
Right.
My father got involved in efforts to try to counter those proposals. When I was about 12 years old, I looked at him one night at dinner and I said, you and your friends are succeeding at beating those proposals so far, but there's no end of them in sight. You need your own proposal. Why don't you come up with and implement a wildlife preserve? So this was a crucial piece of insight that allowed them to add to their defensive agenda something proactive. And within 6 years, the city actually did establish the Palos Verdes Estates Shoreline Preserve. So my father and his colleagues got the objective they wanted, which was preservation of the coastline, and they got another objective, which was that they didn't think of all that much, and that is, can we stop having to defend against other proposals? So one key piece of insight, a lasting difference that's been there for decades, and no effort to continue that difference.
That's a great example. It's interesting how just as a young boy yourself, you were really tapping into the insight process for your future too.
I think I was about 12 years old.
Great. Well, I love what you say in part 1 of your book about how too often efforts fall short, and people make statements like, well, we could have achieved, or we should not have tried. Why do you think this happens?
Well, first of all, it's going to happen even for successful efforts because looking back from the future, you have new insight and new ways to interpret things. The key point I wanted to make in the book is that people can avoid having these sorts of situations in the present if, in fact, they take the time and the effort to step out of the picture and think about what's going on and try to create the insight and then the actions based on maybe some good plans. So why does it happen? I think it's not only that we don't take the time, we don't have the proclivity to do it, but it's also that in society we have checklists and tools for almost everything other than thinking.
That's right.
We don't actually think about thinking as something we can improve.
Sure.
And I'm really hoping that in this area also that I can help society move forward.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. And that's kind of, I think, do you have like an example where you can share about a program or an organization where these efforts had fallen short and how you used insight to help fix those potential problems?
Sure, I'm very glad you asked that, Peter. One of these stems from a period of about 3 years, a little bit more than 3 years, when I served in the federal government under the first President Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush. And part of the role of the 2,000-person group that I led was to be co-CIO for the executive branch of the federal government. So we were a lead in terms of practices related to information as well as computing and telecommunications. Within that role, we were in charge of much of the executive branch's buying of information technology. It was about 3% of the world market at that time. And somebody pointed out to me a problem that was coming up periodically with respect to procurements. Procurement is a big issue in the federal government and in our society, and people really don't tackle it. They fear that any change will just make it worse.
Sure.
Well, before I got there, for example, a large agency might go out to bid for $500 million worth of personal computers. Today, under something that's known as the government-wide acquisition contract, in a similar circumstance, they might go out to bid for considerably more in the way of personal computers, but with the idea that other agencies can also use that procurement and they can use it for the overage. So this was a key piece of insight that realized that it's very difficult to do procurements. It's relatively easy to do orders. There's a key piece of insight in terms of reusing work. And what it came out to mean is that vendors like it very much because they get bigger deals with more opportunities to sell within broader portions of the government. The agencies like it because it's less work and because they get better technology over the years at lower prices, in part because similar contracts compete with each other. And it's really good for taxpayers because we get better governance at a lower cost.
That's tax.
So one very simple idea in a period in which procurement reform was perceived to be difficult, no change of laws or regulations, it worked.
And another nice example, as you said, about how you can use the insight there too. So what is it? Because you mentioned using direct outcomes checklists in the title of your book. So what is a direct outcomes checklist?
Okay, from all this experience, I've realized that there's a lot of similarity among the many activities we do in the workplace and beyond. And there are similar questions that one needs to ask every time. What do we need to do? How do we explain the value of our service to somebody else? What impact will what we're doing having? Who best should do it? How well should we do it? So there are now 11 direct outcomes checklists. Each identifies with one or a few of those types of themes. And somebody can, in the workplace, say, oh, this is what I'm trying to do. This is the type of question I need to ask. Let's try out using one or more of these checklists. And when you get to the checklist, basically it's a two-tier checklist. You get categories to think about. That's my part of the checklist. And then you build in your part of the checklist for any or all of the categories or all of them together some observations about the past and how things went, or some thoughts about what should happen in the future. So it's a very simple, straightforward application to answer the questions, help answer the questions you need to answer.
Well, that's really, I mean, it's so, as you mentioned before, we use checklists all the time anyway, so it seems very, why not have checklists for this process as well, too, right?
Yes.
Well, as you know, I help people with branding themselves, and part of the personal branding process is to create what's called a personal brand statement. And this is like a message that defines your unique promise of value to your target audience. And you have this great game in your book called Two Brains, Tell It and Sell It. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, this might be a really useful tool in actually helping to define someone's personal brand message. So can you briefly explain what this game is and maybe how you might see it fitting into personal branding?
Sure. It's two brains, as you said, tell it and sell it. The tell it side is to focus on the practical value to a customer or a colleague or a teammate, whomever it may be,
right,
of the sorts of things you have to offer. What does it mean to make life practically better for them? And the sell it side is the emotional side.
Right.
How are you going to grab their attention and keep it? So in the game, you're encouraged as an individual or as a team to come up with tell it practical themes, to come up with sell it emotionally appealing themes, and then combine them to see if you can come up with something really compelling that, in the case you're talking about, helps define your brand, because that's what people think about you when they think of you.
Right.
Now, in the book, it's not only there to be helpful, it's in there because I can illustrate the sorts of ideas for practical and for emotional that you can come up with just using the checklists very simply.
Sure.
And all the checklists can contribute, so it really fits. And I really believe this can help people with personal branding and with branding for the organizations that they work with.
Yeah, definitely. I think the key word I like you use there is that compelling message, and we often talk about that in personal branding, that your brand is what is authentic and differentiates you from others, but it's also something that's really relevant and compelling to people who make decisions about you. So I can really see how this game could really help people too. So. Well, thank you, Tom, and I hope that the people who watch this video interview will get some insights for themselves, and will be interested in your book. Now the book is purchased through Amazon, or where can people purchase the book?
Yes, the book can be bought through Amazon.com. I understand that you will show somewhere around this video a link for that and for me, and I appreciate that tremendously. And I'd really welcome feedback from people about how they find the book and success stories or problems they have using the book. But hopefully success stories. I really want people to be much better at tackling more significant problems and opportunities, framing issues better, solving problems, creating opportunities. We can all do it.
Definitely. And so let me, there's the book one more time, Create Crucial Insight by Thomas Buckholtz. And thanks so much, Tom. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we'll stay in touch for sure.
Thanks very, very much, Peter.
Take care.